We are going to talk a little about doing the due diligence, and we're going to start off with qualifying the neighborhood. What I do when I qualify a neighborhood, so in the Pittsburgh market, Pittsburgh's a big city. It's a small big city, really. There's a lot of different neighborhoods within Pittsburgh. So we are continuously opening up new markets. It's like anything else. If you're satisfied where you're at, if you think you're in the perfect location and you don't have to look for something new, chances are you're on your way to go out of business. So we are constantly looking at new ways to invest, new markets to invest in, different ideas, just as you guys are. I speak to many of you, and many of you say, I want to invest in many different markets. I want to invest in Pittsburgh. I want to invest in Cincinnati. I want to invest in Indianapolis, because you want to diversify and you don't want to be all in one location. So with that being said, we start off by looking at the people. We're going to talk about that more. Then we look at the real estate. Those are the two main factors that we look at. We move on from there to look at the schools, the crime, and the local organization. So, to talk about the people, any questions yet? Okay, good. To talk about the people, the first point, now under each area we look at several different things. So if you have a pen and paper, it would be a good time to take notes. I can also send this to you in a PDF format. If you email us afterwards, we'd be willing to do that. There's a lot of information here. Under income, you want to understand the averages and the extremes. So you want to understand what the average incomes in the area are, but you also need to understand the extremes. You know, the extreme on the high end and the extreme on the low end, because those are going to weigh. Those are your outliers. They're going to skew your averages. So, for example, if the average income for some reason, let's say it's $50,000, but there's a high level of poverty in a specified area, that average income of $50,000 is going to be low. Or if you have $50,000, but there's one neighborhood that fits into that community that's a really affluent area, then that $50,000 is going to be high. So it's very important that you also understand the extremes and not just the averages. One of the areas that I use, and write this down, one of the areas that I use to find out a lot of this information about a neighborhood is a website called Neighborhood Scout. There are several others, Street Advisor and CityData.com. I find, for us, we find Neighborhood Scout to be very reliable. I'm not a representative of Neighborhood Scout, so if you sign up for them, I don't get paid anything. That's just what we do. But if you do 2 out of those 3 and compare the data, you should come up with some pretty good information on the neighborhood. So, for example, I'm going to keep using this same example. There was a house on a road called Curry Hollow Road. I drew this presentation up about 2 weeks ago. And when I was drawing this presentation up, I was actually analyzing a property in an area that I haven't bought in yet. So it was perfect timing. As I was drawing this presentation up, I was doing this same analyzation process on a property. I'm going to call it Curry Hollow Road. So I'm going to keep talking to you about examples of Curry Hollow Road. Yes, ma'am?
Still on the people side?
Yes.
The demographic in the age group I'm talking about.
Age group?
Yeah.
Your average age in Pittsburgh is now right around 45 to 50 years old. Okay, so on Curry Hollow Road, in that area, the median household income is $75,000. Now, why is this so important when you're analyzing a neighborhood? As far as the extremes, this happens to be a B+, A- neighborhood in Pittsburgh, believe it or not. $75,000 in Pittsburgh. I know here that's not a lot of money, but in Pittsburgh, $75,000, a household income of $75,000 is doing pretty well. So you have to realize that. And there's the poverty level is 0. So there's no skew on that number on the downside. On the upside, there are no super affluent neighborhoods that are affecting this either. Now, what we look for, and it's typical lender policy, but I have a mortgage background also. I owned my own mortgage company up until 2008. So what I look for is no higher than for the rental payment to be more than 40% of the total net income. So in this particular situation, the median household income net is $75,000. If you take $75,000 times 40%, that gives you $30,000 a year. When you divide that by 12, that's $2,500 a month. So in this particular area, the average home can afford $2,500 a month in rental payment. That's a good place to start when you're analyzing a neighborhood. You want to know what the average household in that area can afford to pay. That's going to help you determine the homes you look at and whether the home that you're looking at fits the neighborhood. Not every home fits the neighborhood. Next, we're going to talk about occupations. Knowing what people do helps to provide a product that meets their needs. Right? Would everybody agree with that? Okay, good. On this Curry Hollow Road example, 40% of the working population is employed in executive, management, and professional occupations, while the second most important occupation is for major sales, accounts, and working in fast food restaurants. Other residents are manufacturing and labor. So based off of this information, what we're looking for is homes and apartments that either fit single individuals or large families. When you have people in the management field in those type of occupations, they're either going to be usually single people or people when they're married that have larger families with pets and things of that such. So that's not always the case. You will have people between that, but to cater to the largest pool of potential tenants, that's what you're looking for. So for example, in this situation, a 2-bedroom house is not the most ideal. You're looking at an apartment for an individual, so a duplex with 2 1-bedrooms, or you're looking at a 3 to 4 bedroom house that has a nice yard. Also, what we look at are unemployment rates. Obviously, unemployment rates are very important, so you want to try to hammer down the unemployment rates in an area to know if the people in that area can afford to pay you rent in that area. In this particular area, where the Curry Hollow Road example, the unemployment rate is 2.6%, which is phenomenal, as anybody knows. In Pittsburgh as a whole, our unemployment rate is 5%. So this area is even lower than the Pittsburgh, but the national unemployment rate is between 7 and 7.5%. Now, just because an area may have above average unemployment rates does not mean that it's not a good potential area to invest in. You have to take many other factors. You're taking all of these factors together. For example, some of the areas we invest in do have unemployment rates around 10 to 12%. However, we know in those areas that we are going to be renting to tenants who have subsidized housing, which means they have Section 8 and things of those such, of which we are not against Section 8. Section 8 is another form of income. If you do the proper tenant screening, then Section 8 can work very well. Some of our best tenants are Section 8 tenants, and some are not. Another thing we look at while looking at the people is household types. What I mean when I state household types is there's different studies and different documentation you can get out there to give you an idea of the household structure. So whether it's a single individual, or it's a one parent with a child, or it's 2 parents with multiple children. Once again, this is all important to make sure the investment that you're buying is catering to the area. In this neighborhood, as we said a few slides back, the majority of the population makes up either a single individual living on their own or a husband and wife with multiple kids and a pet. So you want to we make sure in this area that we are catering towards that. When looking at the people, once again, we look at home ownership versus rent ratio. Kathy stated the fact that in the nation, in the United States overall, that ratio is 60-40, of which I agree. That's pretty close depending on the study you're looking at. In this particular area, the ratio is 86-14. So 86% ownership to 14% tenancy. Looking at that from a landlord standpoint, that sounds really good for home ownership, which it is, but from a landlord standpoint, that's actually tells me that my property is probably going to take a little bit longer to rent because I have a much smaller pool. In our C to C plus neighborhoods, the ratio is that 60-40 ratio. In the B neighborhoods, that ratio is normally about 75 to 25. As you can see, this is a B plus A minus area, 86 to 14. So that's something you want to take into consideration when you're thinking about, hey, how long is my property going to sit vacant? If I'm in a B plus, A minus neighborhood, I have less of a tenant pool. So there's a chance my property may sit vacant for a little bit longer.